So I was sitting in the silence one day, I don't know how many years ago, and it's really lovely when you expand your consciousness and open up with a miracle mindset and say, I wonder what will happen today. What is in my greatest good? What do I need to know? And then become still and remain aware. You can listen, you can look at the screen in your mind's eye, you can see what you sense, and that's what I did. And I'm sitting there and suddenly became aware in my mind's eye of an older man. He looked a bit like Moses. I don't normally see faces in my mind, but this man definitely had the long white hair, a little grizzled, but I could feel him. He was so powerful. And I want to encourage everybody, if you sense a presence when you're in an expanded state of consciousness, engage them. And so that's what I did. Silently, you don't have to speak aloud. I said, who are you? And the answer came back immediately. He said in a deep, powerful voice, Odin. And I remember thinking, who is that? I think I've heard that name before, but I don't know. Well, he's here. Let me ask him. So I said silently, well, who are you really? What do you do? Give me some evidence. And because I get the daily messages that I share online from my guides, I always have pen and paper when I meditate. Today I have an iPad. But at that time I picked up my pen and paper and he started telling me things about him, interspersed with messages for my learning, for my growth. But he showed me. He said, I have a flying horse. Remember the Navy commander, okay? A flying horse. All right, I'll write that down. One of the most beautiful tips I was given from Spirit is be willing to play. Flow with what presents itself to you. Go with it. So, okay, flying horse, write that down. And he said, look at the runes, R-U-N-E-S. There is much wisdom there. So I wrote that down. I wrote down what he looked like. And suddenly I went, ow, because I got a piercing pain in my left side. Wrote that down because I know when I connect with people who used to be in physical form here who are now in the spirit world, they'll often give me symptoms that they pass from. So symptoms are important. So I write that down. And then he gave me messages, one of which I'll share with you later. When I came out of meditation, I thanked him for the visit, still a little uncertain, what is this all about? Who is this man? So I go to Google and I type in Odin. And I was a little bit thrown off balance when I saw who Odin is. Odin is a mythological character, the all-father of the Norse gods. Now I'm thinking, okay, this is a little bit too far out there for me. I don't know what to make of this, but there's an image of Odin, and guess what he looks like? Moses. He has the long white hair, and what really got my attention is he had two wolves standing behind him, and I've written a book called Wolf's Message, and wolves figure very prominently in there, but so do runes. Little stones that you can use as a divination tool by picking one out, and there's a message with it that you can tune into intuitively. Well, I'm researching Odin some more, and it turns out there is an epic poem written about Odin, how he hung from a tree for 9 days, pierced in the side by a spear. The drawing that accompanied the poem I looked up had a spear stuck exactly where I had a physical pain that made me yell out loud. And while Odin, the mythological god, was hanging upside down, he looked down on the ground, according to this epic poem, and saw stones lying on the ground and took up runes. So the practice of using runes dates from the epic poem of Odin, and he is credited with the start of their usage. Now, this is nowhere in my subconscious mind. I never learned this in school or anywhere. I learned it straight from the source, if you want to put it that way. And then I turn to a new page about Odin online, and there's his flying horse with 6 legs, and his name was Sleipnir. So this is the kind of thing where you say, You can't make this stuff up. So where does it come from? Could it be that we are all united with one field of all potential, all possibilities, all kind of wondrous, magical things can arise, especially if they're helpful to us? It's really good to know that. So I prayed, help me understand this oneness. And I wanted to talk more to this guy, because if you're the all-father of the Norse gods, you must be pretty wise, right? So I went back into meditation the next day. And you can ask to communicate with any aspect of higher consciousness. If you don't believe it's true, see what happens, see who shows up, engage them, and ask for evidence. So he came back. I guess I had more learning to do. And I welcomed him back, and we had a little conversation, just like we knew each other always. And I said to him, "Are you real?" And he replied, "As real as you are, but not human." Ooh, I got goosebumps already. But what really blew me away was when I said, "But you are a myth." And without missing a beat, he replied, "You are a myth." Now, I hope that really gets you thinking. Because what are we really? Aspects of one light of consciousness, each of us our own ray, experiencing life through our unique lens, telling our stories. And what is a story? A myth. Joseph Campbell wrote all about myths, and he spoke of the hero's journey. And every one of us is living the myth of the hero's journey. And it's not all beauty and light and smooth and peaceful and wondrous and happy all the time. It's full of trials and tribulations, but it's also one of discovery and thresholds that we cross over when we recall who we are, which is part of one field of consciousness. But we start to have these experiences in consciousness and we say, "Oh, that's not real. I was making it up." But Odin had a greater message in coming through. And he said, "You must stop differentiating between real and unreal. Do you not know now that angels and archetypes are real? All archetypes, and we are archetypes as humans, are groupings of consciousness at different levels of vibration. Anything that can be created in consciousness is real and can convey truth, messages, information, healing, growth, and learning." And then the most important part of his message really was, all is not as it seems. You are just another part of me. Now, does that mean we are part of Odin, he's part of us? And the answer is yes, but not at this seemingly separate level, at the level at which I met him. Like Rumi says, out beyond ideas of right doing and wrong doing, there is a field. I will meet you there. And that's where we meet any grouping of consciousness, any myth, any true story that has something to teach us. So I took all that on board, but I'm on the hero's journey too, like all of us, stumbling a bit along this path. And I'm in meditation one morning, good 3 months after Odin showed up, haven't heard from him, haven't thought about him, and suddenly here he is. Just like somebody steps in a room and you recognize them, I recognized that presence, sensed who it was, and he looked at me and he said, "Who was my son?" Now I find this so clever, so creative, so evidential that a higher being would step in and engage me and ask me a trick question. But I knew the answer. Why? Because I had Googled him 3 months earlier. I know this. Your son was Thor, which I did find interesting because Thor is the god of thunder and lightning, and my stepdaughter Susan was killed by lightning. And then Odin rocked my world when he asked, "And who was your Susan's dog?" And suddenly, a photo that I had forgotten, the very last photo we have of Susan, came into my mind's eye. And it's her curled up on the couch in her home with her brand new puppy, who 3 months before she was struck by lightning, named Thor. And it never occurred to us. If you read my book, Wolf's Message, you'll see that that young man named Wolf also knew and left evidence that he would be struck and killed by lightning. How do these things happen? Because we are not only human. We can rise above our human challenges when we remember we're souls, unite with the field from which we all arise as myths, as stories, and learn solutions to our challenges here. So I came out of meditation and I rushed and found Ty shaving in the bathroom. Ty, guess what Odin just told me? Now, Ty's a retired destroyer captain, okay? And I'm telling him that this Norse god just told me, you need to realize what's going on here. And all of a sudden I said, what was her other dog's name? And we couldn't remember. So when you can't remember something, you're in a little box. How do you remember? Shift. Who was Susan's other dog? And I'll leave it to the universe. I turned around and there it was. I turned back to him and I said, oh my God, Loki. She named her other dog Loki, which was Odin's other son. You're exactly right. And it was only recently, while preparing for a presentation, that I realized Susan's third dog was named Athena, who is the Greek goddess of thunder and lightning. So I hope I'm getting you to think outside the box now. We went to New Zealand about a year later, hadn't heard from Odin, and he showed up just before we left, and he put in my mind's ear, in the soul's ear, Dagaz. And I've never heard that word, but I spelled it phonetically, D-A-G-A-Z. Looked it up online, and it's a rune. It's one of Odin's runes, and it stands for transformation. And I got a little excited. We head for New Zealand, I think a new country, new adventures, and it was probably the first week of that several-week trip. I'm sitting in meditation because I don't miss a day. It's a sacred connection you can establish with spirit. And here comes Odin. And he says, what is today's date? And I had to think for a minute, and I said, January 11th. And he said, what are the numbers? And I said, well, that would be 111. Look it up, he says. So I look up 111, and it means new beginnings. So more excitement. So Ty and I went for a hike, and I realized, well, I'm supposed to have a new beginning of some type. What would be in my best interest? And I sensed, why don't you try tuning into higher consciousness, not just in meditation, but on your hike? Well, that was new for me. I'm encouraging all of you to try this anytime, especially out in nature. So I call on him on the trail, and he walked right beside me. And I said, I need some evidence. And he said, Sowilo. I had no idea what that was. So when we got back to our hotel, which is where I had internet, I looked it up, and it is the rune, a rune, which I had never heard of, which stands for the source, the sun, oneness. Pretty awesome stuff. So I went into meditation again, now that I know we can tap into anybody at any time. And I asked to talk to Odin because I wanted to understand more about how this connection happens. And instead, my Susan showed up. Really shocked me. She's so clear when she comes in. I hear her in her own voice. Many times when I talk to other people's loved ones, it sounds just like my own voice. But this was Susan. And she's chatting with me and so happy that we're in New Zealand and had a message for her dad. And then a little miracle happened. And for me, a miracle is when the veil parts and you see truth with a capital T. Mm-hmm. Susan morphed into Odin. Felt exactly like Odin. And I thought, what just happened here? And then Odin, who simply smiled at me wisely, morphed right back into Susan. And I knew not to ask, are you real? And I said, what's going on here, Susan? She said, it's all malleable, Suzanne. You said you wanted to experience oneness. It's all of us. I'm here. Your guides are here. Jesus is here. Archangel Michael is here. We are all the same, just different instruments in one symphony. Which instrument you focus on is the one you experience. What I just said may go over some of your heads. You may say she was making all of that up. But we're all stories. We're all expressions from the field of love, because love is lack of separation, total connectedness. And our stories arise as they bring messages, information, healing, growth, and love. Does that make me any less real now? Does that make Odin any less real, that we arise as it serves the greater good? I met another woman who's here today in the most magical way, just when she needed it. And we hugged and I said, this is a God wink. This is the way the universe shows us, shows you. You are not alone. Death does not part us. In fact, I'm closer now to Susan than I ever was, because I can call on her anytime, as you can with all of your loved ones, anytime, because we all exist in the sea of consciousness. So life is challenging. We are all heroes because we as souls agreed to come here and go through the trials of life in human form. Nobody said it would be easy. And I'm going to ask my dear friend's forgiveness for sharing a story here, but I met her for lunch yesterday and hadn't seen her in a while. Her name is Valerie. She is the most beautiful soul. And she's been going through a tremendous challenge with cancer, a visitor, a temporary visitor in her body that can provide learning and growth. And she shared with me, and I'm so grateful to be able to share it with all of you, an insight she got because she knows how to tap into God, the source, for insights. And she said, life was so perfect. Everything was going so well. And then cancer came along. Why did it have to happen when everything was so perfect? And she got the message, and I hope I repeat her correctly. Would you like this to happen when things weren't perfect? She had all the support that she needed around her. So as you go through your challenges, if you can find the perfection, the blessing, then you are milking this story for all it's worth. So it doesn't matter if our experiences, our adventures in consciousness with higher beings who truly do come in to teach us, to show us the way, are real or not. Are they helpful? Are they healing? Do they bring more love into this world? They happen because at this level, everything appears separate. When I was in the military, If we would speak about oneness, that was marching in step, wearing the same uniform. That is a form of human oneness. But the oneness we can learn about by connecting in our hearts with our soul, trusting we are part of something so much greater, tapping into that, setting the story aside, and feeling that connection, that oneness will transform your life. That's the meaning of Dagaz. And Soilo, the source, is what unites us all. So I thank Odin. I thank my angels for giving me the courage when I first shared that story. Who's going to believe me? I have a video out about Archangel Michael now. It's going through the roof with views. I'm so grateful because it's a story that needs to be heard, that Archangel Michael is real. But one person commented, yeah, it's a great story if it's true. And the thing is, when you tap in with your heart to the soul, you don't have to make anything up. You don't have to exaggerate. Truth is truth with a capital T. It speaks to the heart. If you can't sense the truth when you tap into truth with a capital T, begin at the heart. Peel back the clouds that are blinding that sun that never goes out. That's the truth I want you all to take. I'll meet you there. Thank you so much.